Welcome to Hard Talks with Dr. Gloria. I'm Dr. Gloria Thomas Anderson, your host, and I'm really honored today to have my very special friend and mentor and wise counselor, Dr. Kenyon C. Burke, with us today. Welcome, Dr. Burke.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be invited.
Thank you for accepting my invitation to be on Heart Talks. I wanted to invite you, and let me give a little backstory as to how this came about. I dreamed one night that of Black elder wisdom. It was just in my head. And when I woke up, I saw you. I saw your image, and I was like, oh gosh, I want to do a show with you to talk about some of the things that are going on around political issues and things that I know are at your heart core and all the work you've been doing. But before we get started on that, thank you again for being my guest today. And I'd like you to just share a little bit about who Dr. Burke is.
I've spent most of my working career working on social justice issues, and as of late, trying to dismantle racism and teach other people how to do the same. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in the height of the Depression, and in a manufacturing era, which means that's when the manufacturing industry was carrying the load of the economy here in this country. And so that's where people got most of their jobs came, if it weren't agricultural, came through that industry. They either made tires or they had melted steel. They did all kinds of things, automobile parts, but that was really what really was the major employer. This was Cleveland, Ohio, is on Lake Erie, if you remember your geography. And I live 15 minutes walk from Lake Erie. Meaning we had steel mills and auto body shops. It was a big industry. I lived in a Jewish community, in an integrated school system, no Black teachers in my public education from K through 12. And I also went to school with students who were fortunate enough to escape Hitler and the Holocaust. That was an interesting thing for me, because when they first came, the local Jewish community, boys and girls made fun of them and laughed at them, and because they looked funny, they were pale and they wore some funny clothes. But when they got settled and the exams came out, they blew the top off the curve, because they came out of families that had money, and those are the ones that got out. But I learned from them class structure. Okay. And in that community, and I learned that before I learned art. So that was an informative part. Racism was everywhere. I want you to know, this is not a new issue. Sometimes they called it something else, but it really was racism. And it was institutional racism in public life, like in employment areas, barbershops, beauty salons, YMCA, all of these things were places that we couldn't go or get jobs, department stores, all of that. My father worked as a red cap. Red caps were men who picked up your luggage and put them on the train. My father organized that, and I learned what community organization early, because I was a little boy, but I watched him, and he took me to a lot of meetings and so forth. My mother, he went to Ohio State. My mother graduated from what was called normal schools, which is the first 2 years of college, and she went to Wilberforce and then went to University of Cincinnati and got a bachelor's degree. I don't want to spend too much time on the family. I mentioned that because I want to give you two examples of how things operated in those days. My mother lived in Cincinnati, where I was born. My father lived 242 miles north in Cleveland, and we moved there about 2 years when I was about 2 years old. When my mother arrived with this teaching certificate and a bachelor's degree, she couldn't get a job teaching school because they would not hire a married woman to teach public school. I want you to know, we're talking about ancient history, you think, but I remember all this because that caused my mother to go off to Western Reserve and become a social worker. So that's all I wanted to say about that. I learned to navigate the world that was divided by race, ethnicity, religion, and other things, because they might have been a little different. Maybe they had what was called a handicap, a physical handicap, and they had a lot. If they just looked different, somehow they were excluded from the main line of life in the city. Actually, by the time I was in high school, I had become a bridge person, which means I had my foot in many communities, well, obviously in the Jewish community, and also at times in the Black community. There were 3 concentrations of Blacks living in Cleveland at that time. They weren't contiguous. The struggle for racism is not new. It continues. Hate and bigotry have eaten away at this society for some time. It all reaches back to 400 years ago, as you probably are aware of. This is a long lecture, and I don't want to get to that, but I wonder if you had a question for me, Gloria. I've been talking.
Well, I have a few questions for you, but what you're saying is laying the groundwork for the questions I have. So thank you for sharing that background. One of the things I know we had talked about before was George Floyd, the situation. And you mentioned that Emmett Till was the George Floyd of your day. Can you expound a little bit about what that experience was like for you, being a young man yourself when that happened?
Yeah, that was a kind of a benchmark in our struggle for racial justice, in that the mother of Emmett Till forced the media to take pictures of him. I say force the media because we didn't normally, our concerns or issues did not normally appear in the local newspaper. It appeared in the Black newspapers, but it didn't. But she forced that, and that became national, and everybody saw what he looked like. He'd been mutilated, and this was very chilling. That was a response that most of us had, but it was made public, and it was visible, and it was very much like the hoses that were and the billy clubs that were put up against George. Well, the one in the '60s, he just died.
John Lewis.
John, yeah.
Yeah.
John,
Yeah, you knew him too, right?
Yeah, we were on programs together and everything. I knew
Yes.
him. I guess because we're mentioning John, I should say I was at the March on Washington in 1963.
Yeah, so today was an anniversary of that.
Right.
How did that feel to you to see 57 years later, people were still rallying around the same issues that have been going on?
Well, I think I'm pleased to see that the world has now seen, but because of the way we get information with the internet and everything, the world has seen the terror that lived in our community from the time since they came here in 1615. It was chilling. I want to say something about John. I said it. John was really an authentic member of the group with the top leadership in the civil rights. Or now, when I see them demonstrating now, I think Black Lives is right on many. I think this is their time. This is their moment. This is not 1965, and it shouldn't be, and it couldn't be. And their tools and their schedules and strategies are theirs, and they are timely. And I am all for them. I'm pushing them. Now, they're not going to do everything that people agree with, but that's not new. We had a lot of disagreement during the 60s of the movement. But anyways, the struggle went on. It goes on. And I'm delighted that one of the few positive things of the pandemic is that it pulled the cover off of all these inequities and unequal relationships we have with the white community in this country, because our story is just beginning to be told, and that's because the new media never carried anything that happened in our communities unless it was off of the police blotter. Mm-hmm. So, but now this is not a race issue. It's a global issue. And that, to me, that's positive. I'm delighted, and I just think that the struggle against racism and hate and bigotry, it continues. It has eaten away at this country's core, and that causes institutional racism to be in the DNA of this country. But if I would just say that if we could be as creative to include people as we are to exclude people, this would be a healthier global village. And we have to learn how to do that. Now, it's not easy. Social change is not easy, but this has to be resolved. We will survive this dark period, and we have survived worse if you know our history. And with God's help and hope, he has brought us this far. Now, Martin Luther King used to say, is being quoted all the time, but one of the things I found fascinating that he used to say, one of them was, we are not what we could be, and we aren't what we should be, but thank God we are not what we were. And I can testify to you that this world is different, and we are in more places, and we are in more places of power, and we have the main line companies in this country making sure that we recognize our story of oppression, which was never told, and it's all hanging out there. And that's I say one of the values of the pandemic. It sure had some the negative things, but learning to listen to each other's stories, across racial, ethnic, and lines of communities that are different. That is really the way to address this corrosive thing that's in our society called racism. Learning to listen to stories across these lines. Biblically, I will say, love thy neighbor as thyself is a good place to start.
Yes, Absolutely. I so agree with that. And, you and I've had so many rich conversations around the issues of racism and institutionalized the structure of that in permeating every part of our society. And it's for me too, I'm encouraged to see the movements that are moving forward, like Black Lives Matter and other people joining in that with their voices too, and advocacy and standing up to be a part of that. So we're working together, and we need that. We need that in order to make change in those levels of policy and the political arena, which is where the power structure really dictates what happens to the community level. And so it's very exciting to see people coming together in this way of all creeds, colors, ethnicities, abilities to put their heads together, put their hearts together and their hands together to make a difference right now, that we can move toward an equitable society.
Well, that I certainly say amen on that one. Yeah.
Well, Kenyon, I want to ask you, and I call you Kenyon, but I refer to you as Dr. Kenyon because you have earned that title.
Gloria, you'd be surprised. Gloria, excuse me. You'd be surprised what I've been called, so you just go right ahead.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask, just thinking about your life, and you are an elder now and a very well respected one. I know that from lots of people. What would you say you've learned, or that you know now for sure, that you wish you had known when you were in your 30s?
To tell you the truth, I wish I'd had time to do daily devotions, which I do now. Every morning I get up, I read. Soon after breakfast, I read daily. Now, that doesn't mean God wasn't on my mind, but I was so engaged with not just survival, but achieving and combating this racism from a professional standpoint. And actually, it's like I said, it started down really in high school, I guess. And so I just think I would, although I went to church regularly, and I went to 3 churches sometimes on one Sunday. I was Episcopalian, and I was they called an altar boy then, and I went to, that was at 10:30 on Sunday, and at 12:30 I was at St. James AME Sunday school, and sometimes I went to Baptist church, BYPU groups and activities. So we were very ecumenical, and I've had an ecumenical life. I've been able to travel, but all of those early ecumenical experiences prepared me to be able to handle international racism, which I saw in many countries and worked on. So, but you always wish you had more then, but that's the growth process is you're not where you were, like
you said earlier.
And I'm just delighted that I'm be able to have this conversation with you.
Well, in closing, one of the things that I wanted to ask, what gives you hope in this hour with so much going on around us? What gives you hope, and what would you share with those that are listening that may be needing to feel hopeful right now?
Well, the struggle is an old struggle, and you have to be informed to deal with it. And although rebellion and tearing down buildings and all that, and that might be blowing off steam, but the real work is there to be done. But you have to be trained and recognize and well read, and recognize that different people bring different gifts. Some people speak very well. The labor movement learned that the person that you send in to negotiate with the Harvard lawyer, is not the same person that's throwing a brick at them. You know, and that's, you know, that's, you learn those things. And the sooner you learn that, and that you learn that people are, all people have faults, and you might learn to be less judgmental earlier in your life, which you're very judgmental, but you begin to see that the world's beyond you. And a lot of people have been involved in this struggle for a long time.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing those words of wisdom about your life and about the struggle that we are all continuing to move forward in with hope and with the help of the Lord, which has been our anchor all along. For many of us anyway, we know that our strength comes from our relationship with God. And so spending time with God is something that you said you wish you could have done more of when you were earlier on in your life. But you know, it's a beautiful thing that it's never too late for us to do that. And so, I love that as well. It gives me strength to have my time with God and to commit all things unto Him, especially with all that's going on around us. So anyway, it's been a delight to have you again. Thank you so much for being a special honored guest on Heart Talks today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
God bless you. And thank each of you for joining us today for Heart Talks. I pray that you have a wonderful week ahead and that God bless you and your family and all that pertains to you. Bye-bye.